For over a decade, Thomas Müller did everything football asks of a player. He scored in World Cups, assisted in Champions League semi-finals, won league titles, and delivered in the biggest games of his generation. And yet, he was never treated like a superstar. Nobody built a brand around him. Nobody called him the future of football. Nobody argued that he was the best in the world. He was always just there, reliable, effective, winning, and somehow that was enough for people to forget just how good he actually was. Thomas Müller doesn't look like a football icon. He doesn't glide across the pitch like a classic playmaker. He doesn't dance past defenders like a winger. He doesn't strike the ball with the elegance of a traditional number 10. Sometimes he looks awkward. Sometimes his touches seem heavy. Sometimes his movements don't even make sense at first glance. But that surface-level judgment hides something deeper, because Müller was never trying to impress you. He was trying to outthink you. In 2010, at just 20 years old, Müller arrived at the World Cup and scored 5 goals. Not as the star, not as the focal point, but as the player who always appeared exactly where he needed to be. 4 years later, Germany lifted the World Cup trophy, and once again, Müller was everywhere. Pressing, scoring, assisting, creating chaos in defensive lines. But when people talked about that team, they talked about Schweinsteiger's leadership, Neuer revolutionizing goalkeeping, Kroos controlling games. Müller was rarely the headline. Even though he kept deciding matches at Bayern Munich, the pattern continued. Champions League campaigns filled with decisive moments, late runs into the box, perfectly timed movements, assists that looked simple but were anything but. Season after season, he produced double-digit goals and assists. Not once, not twice, but consistently. Consistency is supposed to earn respect, but in Müller's case, it almost made him invisible. Because consistency doesn't shock people. It doesn't trend, it doesn't create viral moments, it just wins. Müller once described himself as a Raumdeuter, a space interpreter, not a classic striker, not a traditional number 10, not a winger. Something different. He studied space the way others studied the ball. While defenders watched the play unfold, Müller watched the gaps. While others reacted to passes, he predicted them. He understood the rhythm of a game before it fully developed, and that type of intelligence is hard to quantify. It doesn't show up in flashy compilations, and it doesn't fit into a simple label, but it changes games. Modern football celebrates aesthetics. We celebrate step-overs, long-range screamers, highlight reels, and individual brilliance. There is nothing wrong with that, but somewhere along the way we started confusing beauty with value. Müller was rarely beautiful, but he was devastatingly effective. He didn't need to beat 3 defenders. He needed 1 second of space, and he knew exactly when that second would appear. There is something uncomfortable about players like Müller. They force you to rethink what greatness looks like, because greatness is not always elegant. Sometimes it is awkward. Sometimes it is subtle. Sometimes it is so intelligent that it looks accidental. That is why people underestimated him. Not because he lacked quality, but because his quality was not obvious. Even when he went through difficult periods, tactical shifts, coaching changes, systems that did not fully suit him, he adapted. He reinvented his role. He dropped deeper, pressed harder, created more, and kept producing. Not loudly, not dramatically, just effectively. When football history looks back, it will not remember how Müller ran or how awkward he sometimes appeared. It will remember the trophies, the goals in knockout matches, and the intelligence that made teams function. Because players like Thomas Müller do not dominate headlines, they dominate outcomes. Maybe football did not forget Thomas Müller entirely. Maybe we just never valued the type of brilliance he represented. In a sport obsessed with style, he chose substance. In a sport chasing viral moments, he chose positioning. In a sport that celebrates the spectacular, he mastered the simple. And sometimes the simple is harder to understand. One day, When his career is completely finished and the noise fades, people will look at the numbers, the medals, the longevity, and ask a quiet question. How did we never call him one of the best?